Hi, my name is Stacy. I'm 20 years old, and this story happened when I was in college. You know those stories about good girls and bad guys? Or about an unpopular guy and the queen of the school? You must admit that in life, everything looks very different from the TV series. But not always. Watch this video to the end and find out how a typical good girl got her bad guy, like in a school melodrama. I had a crush on Ethan since freshman year. This is my favorite type, called the bad guy who will never look at you. The worst part was that sometimes Ethan did pay attention to me. Well, quite occasionally, a couple of times, he noticed that I had gone to the barber shop or something. I could not understand if this was a humanitarian aid, a compliment to a girl with a lot of complexes, or was he just trolling? But it still made my heart flutter. Most of the time, Ethan hung out with some guys from the suburbs. He rode a bike to college. Although, rode to college was a bit of an overstatement. He didn't go to college very often. I even had separate holiday dates on my calendar. Ethan was in college today, and a separate black line every year. Ethan is trying to transfer to the next course. The fact was that every year they tried to kick him out of college, and every year, in some incredible way, at the last moment, he moved up to the next course. You 100% have been surrounded by such people, haven't you? While you are studying for days, this guy spits at the ceiling and then suddenly passes all perfectly, and you can only tear your hair and ask, well, how? Well, now I know how. This year, when Ethan accumulated a lot of missed assignments, he came to me with it so that I could help him as a friend. And I agreed. I don't have a life, but I'm not out of the woods and I watch TV shows. I knew this was my chance. I had no friends. Relations with my parents, who stayed in another city, were strained. So I was all alone at the time and tried to think less about it. So there was no one to reason with me, and I moved from the polite ignore zone to the easy friend zone. We agreed to study in the computer class after school. Many of us did this. That was the first time I put on makeup in college. I felt myself fantastically stupid, so out of place that it was hard to even convey. I was very glad that at the last moment I came to my senses, ran to the toilet, and washed from my face everything that I had depicted there before. So we started studying together. Well, kind of studying. Ethan didn't do anything, and I knew he was taking advantage of me. But this was the first time we had spoken alone in 3 years. And he thanked me very warmly for my help, so I couldn't refuse. This went on 2 or 3 more times. But in the end, the celebration of friend zone ended. I was sick. With a firm, trembling hand, I wrote to Ethan that I wasn't coming to class today. To which Ethan complained that these were the assignments he needed to urgently complete, and maybe he could just send me the tasks and I would do everything and send it to him. I almost agreed. It was only at the last moment that I realized that he would still be sending me his assignments, that our meetings would be over, and that I would just be left in the company of his disgusting essays and half-written tests. And I said no. That sounded strong, didn't it? I actually said, "No, Ethan, I can't solve them without you. Since I'm sick, can you just get to me? Moreover, you have a bike. Probably it will not be difficult." My neighbor, we weren't very friendly, did ooh, and she went to a friend's house for the night. I tried to argue that there would be no ooh, but who was listening to me? I was glad that I didn't allow myself to be completely turned into a free online tutor, and it took me a while to realize that I'd called home a guy I actually had a crush on. And I was in snot, depression, and pajamas. I flushed, and it had nothing to do with the temperature. What a shame. I ate a lot of antipyretics, threw away my paper handkerchief, and waited. Ethan arrived with a bruised face. Very bruised. I didn't immediately figure out where to put the ice. And he didn't explain anything to me. He joked that we both have health problems and dumped his urgent assignments on me and a bag of oranges. I was busy until almost morning. Too many tests and too sore ahead. And then Ethan took off and gave me one last joke about how smart I was, but took guys to my house at night, so I should be careful. And we didn't have any ooh like I thought. I spent half the day eating oranges and watching TV shows. And the more I watched them, the worse they affected me. Do you think that TV series about teenage love help a lot in real-life situations? Huh. They are hopeful tales, but very convincing if you are killed by unrequited love and uncompleted tests in sociology. I suddenly thought, what if Ethan really liked me? But then I told myself, no, it couldn't be. I was a nerd with glasses and no personal boundaries. So I decided to put Ethan out of my mind, think about my own interests, and do something about my missed assignments, which were beginning to accumulate because I helped this jerk with his study. The school year was over. I was a little down on the results, but not so much that my parents raised the issue of not helping me with money. Ethan again successfully crossed the line and also transferred to the next course. And then, when I even began to get it sometimes and not to think about him, he appeared on the horizon and offered me a bonus date. For my help, you see. I was confused and agreed. My heart was pounding like I'd drunk 10 liters of coffee. I was torn from to merge, pretending to be sick, to put on a beautiful dress. I even consulted a neighbor, and she again said her, ooh, and decided to leave us alone. It was terribly awkward. In the end, I gave up. I decided I wasn't going anywhere because Ethan wouldn't even think about me the next day. Again, I was wrong. Because late at night, my doorbell rang, and yes, it was Ethan. He was very joyful and said it was the first time he had been bailed on, and by who? Me. I asked him where he came from, and he said he remembered my address, and that I dumped him, and that now I definitely owed him a date. Well, I answered in the same tone that on our last date, he appeared with a broken face and did not explain anything, and how should I take it? Ethan fell silent. I was silent too. Finally, I firmly said that TV series were TV series, but I would not go on a date with a guy who did not tell me a word of the truth. Then Ethan told me everything. He said he was stupid enough to get into debt, and now he needed money. Here, even I with my crash tensed up. I thought that now he would start to borrow money from me, and even I couldn't be such a fool. But then Ethan said he had been collecting the money himself for a long time. I found out that he worked part-time at one of the clubs in a bad neighborhood. He said that he would soon collect the entire amount to close the debt, so the main thing for him was not to get thrown out of college and that no one would tell his mother about these problems. He was very dramatic, so I took it down a little and assured him that I didn't know his mother. And of course, I asked him how I could help. It's Ethan. Well, you know. Ethan looked at me carefully, sighed, and said that until recently, he would have just borrowed money from me and not given it back. But I was so open with my crash that even he was uncomfortable. And anyway, this was the most idiotic date of his life. I didn't even offer tea. It was probably the right moment to fall into each other's arms, like in the TV series. But I was afraid. The guy owed someone a lot of money after all. Got into fights, lied. Bad guy was, of course, my dream, but not that bad. And I told him that the date would be when he got out of trouble and improved his studies, and I would improve my studies. Well, our first real date is tomorrow. Yes, this hopeless man had finally sorted out his life, though he had to sell the bike. And then he lived with me for another 6 months for food. He's a really good cook, by the way. And he is trying to convince me that instead of a meringue dress, it's better to buy a new bike for the wedding. By the way, my neighbor said, "Ooh," when she moved out, and I added her in social networks. If we succeed, I will definitely write to her. I want it to be ooh at least once it was appropriate. Have you ever had a movie-like story? Tell us in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the videos you like. There will be new stories soon.
Hi, my name is Kristen. Now I'm getting ready to go to college, and I'm learning to live a new life. A life after stalking. Perhaps you have already had to deal with obsessive stalking. I think people often romanticize these things, and I did it myself. Watch this video to the end. I'll tell you how stalking led me to hide in a guy's closet. When I first liked a guy, I found all his social networks, found out who he communicated with, what he was interested in, who he was friends with, where he went. I looked at everything. The saved files, the geolocation. I studied the profiles of his friends. And I thought I was doing the right thing because I wanted to know more about him. I was preparing the foundation of our future love. He was in his senior year, a year older. When I plucked up the courage to speak to him in person, it turned out that he barely remembered my name, and I knew everything, including the name of his grandmother's cat. We never got to date. So I switched to his friend, then to Jake from the basketball team, then to Mike, who was taking extra classes in cybernetics with me. When I began to walk unobtrusively under Mike's windows in the evenings and then dropped a present on his doorstep, his parents wrote me a lot of irritated letters. When it came to school, a psychologist talked to me and Mike texted me to leave him alone. I wept for my feelings. That was trash. My parents decided to help me start a new life. We moved and I started my senior year with a clean slate at a new school. And of course, he happened to me. Have you ever made the same mistakes? I do this regularly. Yes, we didn't know each other. Yes, he didn't know anything about me. But I knew the main thing. He was handsome, he suited me, and his name was Sam. I once heard his sister call him to dinner. I quickly developed a plan of approach through a fake account on the social network. But Sam didn't want to get close to me, responded a couple of times with a smiley face to the tracks I sent him, and then banned me. He was so taciturn. He had such an empty profile. Even his favorite music or some funny photos were not there. I was even more interested in him. This unapproachable guy should have been my boyfriend by now, but instead, he was hanging out online and didn't pay any attention to me. And he didn't post anything. I was starving for information. I went to Plan B and met his younger sister, Abigail. I learned from Abby that her brother was a boring fan of old black and white movies. Damn, it was very mysterious. I couldn't imagine how anyone would like that at all. I signed up for extra film classes and asked Gabby about the movies her brother liked. At home, I put them on the list. It turned out impressive. Later, 2 more favorite colors and favorite food were added to the list. After watching half the list of movies, I decided to change my image. I wanted to be like his favorite type. I begged my parents for an appointment with the hairdresser, cut my hair, and dyed it. During the 2 weeks of my investigations, my grades were slipping, so my parents were very unhappy. The questions began. I made a real drama. I shouted that I wanted to start a new life, that I needed changes, new electives, and hobbies. I spent my pocket money on vintage dresses. In the film section, I became the best of the best. And then, just when I was about to ask Sam out for a rare movie, Abby invited me to her birthday party. Oh, this was a chance! 1 in 1,000. A party where Sam and I would end up in the same house. I could imagine their parents taking off for the night, a great party beginning, and then we would go to a movie together and be left alone. But it turned out that Sam didn't want to hang out with his little sister's friends and went to stay with friends all night. I was terribly upset, but I recovered quickly. I had all night to find out more about Sam. No one paid any attention to me, so I crept into Sam's bedroom. I looked around his desk and found nothing interesting. Notebooks, flash drives, some printouts. Here was the wardrobe! I found something very strange in it. There was money there. Lots of money in bundles. I quickly closed the wardrobe, told Abby I was sick, and ran home. I really felt bad. Such money could not just appear in the closet of a guy who was 2 months and 3 days younger than me. I assumed Sam was involved in crime. But how? He was a skinny guy with glasses. He didn't look like a criminal who could take someone's iPhone. I decided that Sam was a hacker and hacked the codes of the banks. I needed an ally in my investigation more than ever, so I decided to recruit Abby. I told her I needed help, or rather, not me, but Sam, because strange things were clearly happening to him. I told her about the money in the closet, and Abby immediately called me a stalker. But she agreed to listen when she saw how worried I was. Have you ever saved people even from an imaginary disaster? This is so inspiring. We made assumptions, one worse than the other. I learned from Abby that her brother wanted to go to college, and her parents were worried that they wouldn't be able to pay for his education. That explained everything. He was trying to get money for college by himself, but he was going to ruin his life like this. To find out everything once and for all, we arranged a friendly sleepover at Abby's. I was very annoyed by her indecision. We shouldn't fail such a special operation. And she said that it was creepy and that it was disgusting and wrong to follow people. I was afraid that she would fail the whole plan. The plan was for Abby to distract Sam. He would leave the room. I would hide in his closet. Then I would eavesdrop on what he was talking about or watch what he was doing. Then Abby would distract him again, and I would run out of the room. But just as I was getting into the closet, Abby suddenly climbed in after me. She said she wanted to know the truth too. I tried to push her back. She grabbed the door. We dropped a couple of things and had a big fight. And it seemed that a shelf with things and bundles of money began to slowly fall on us. I was terribly angry. There was no one to distract Sam a second time. He was supposed to come in any minute, and we locked ourselves in his closet forever until morning or even longer. I described our starvation in the closet to Abby, and Abby mumbled something about my brother going to brush his teeth, and he might want to go to the bathroom or get a drink of water in the kitchen. Then we heard Sam's footsteps. Abby started crying, and I begged her to be quiet. She wouldn't stop, and I started shushing her and scaring her in whispers that Sam would be offended if we were caught here and would never forgive her, and we wouldn't save his future. We sat in the closet for half an hour while more and more t-shirts slowly fell on us from the sagging shelf. Sam sat on the bed in his smartphone and did nothing interesting. He listened to some pop music, scratched, picked his nose. The image of a romantic hacker crumbled before my eyes. Abby started whispering to me that her leg was numb. I told her to shut up immediately. We began making noises. Sam looked up and my heart sank. Then his phone rang. He picked up the phone and we heard something terrible. Tomorrow, at the same time. You should bring a gun. This was the last straw. Abby ran to Sam, throwing his t-shirts and shouting that we knew everything and that he could tell us everything. Their parents came running at the noise. I realized that I was still sitting in this closet, covered in money and fallen things, and tried to get out. Sam didn't speak until their parents had finished telling us off. He said the money wasn't real. He and his friends had printed it for a scene they were going to shoot for an amateur film competition. And if he passed the competition, they would take him to college. And if we rummaged in the closet, we would find a hat with slits for the eyes and many other interesting props. I didn't leave the house for 2 days, pretending to be ill and worrying about my failure. It was clear that I wasn't going to get anywhere with Sam. I messed it up again. And I did it myself instead of inviting Sam to the movies or even talking about movies. On the 3rd day, I went to the mirror and saw a stranger there, in someone else's clothes, with someone else's hair, with someone else's hobbies. I just got back from the barber shop. I have a new haircut. I chose it myself. I'm going to throw out my movie list and go out with Abby tonight. We decided to try to make friends, although she hasn't invited me to her house yet, and I'm not sure I want to take the risk myself. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the best video.
Hi, my name is Daisy. I'm only 17 and I have already managed to break up with the Prince Charming. Do you believe in destiny? Have you ever tried to predict the future? So, did it come true? My prediction came true, but definitely not in a way as I'd wanted it to. Watch this video till the end and find out what secret my fortune teller kept. I'm a hilarious girl. One might say a hooligan. Have always been so. Fortunately, I'm lucky with my parents. Firstly, they always forgive me everything. Secondly, they are totally rich, so I always have money for my antics. And as for me, I never mind sharing a little of this wealth with my close ones. But this eventually led me to trouble. Last year I got a boyfriend, Brent, a real Prince Charming. With him I felt like a princess, even more than with all my parents' money put together. But we were different. Like, very different. Brent loved studying. I preferred to have a good time. Brent kept a healthy lifestyle. I kept having a good time. Brent was a fan of theaters and museums, and I was, yes, a fan of having a good time. Brent had awesome plans for the future. A family, PhD, and an own business. I planned to keep having a good time. Fate brought us together in a cinema on the movie premiere. He craved with a disgust to leave, and I watched it for the 3rd time in a row. Now, I'm not sure that everything was that simple. Maybe that cat was hunting a mouse for a long time and the movie was just an excuse. Have you ever been used by other people? Terrible feeling. It was nice in the beginning. He was so sober and serious, training me stricter than my own father. It came up to me too late that he was interested not in my well-being, but in a way I fit into his future plans. The future mayor cannot have a radical wife, can he? But the re-education process was hard. I was very wayward. If he dragged me to a theater, I dragged him to a shooting gallery, or to a picnic in the park instead of museums. This seemed like a real war. But anyways, he was a good boy and an amazing boyfriend. He even had nice relations with his exes. And moreover, my family liked him. Well, my girlfriends had mixed opinions about him, and my bestie Sarah was certainly ready to simmer and hiss from Brent. Life has shown that Sarah was right while others were completely wrong. A couple of weeks ago, a traveling circus showed up in our town. A pretty fine one on a train with the marquees, animals, and its own Laguna Park. To my surprise, Brent did not roll his eyes, saying that circus was a childish entertainment and I should better go to look at a dinosaur skeleton in the museum with him. Maybe he was not so hopeless. Sarah went there with me, and we had a lot of fun on a roller coaster, in a shooting gallery, and around the popcorn tent. Of course, we teased each other. As we were walking past the clairvoyance tent, Sarah, a convinced skeptic and materialist, began to nudge me and indignantly snort. Well, I immediately decided to spite her a little. Inside of the gloomy and obviously magical tent sat the prophetic Cassandra. Her services were too expensive for a traveling circus, but it was not a big deal to me. I never counted money. The fortune teller was clearly happy about my appearance. Probably only a few agreed to pay that much. At first, I was giggling, not believing myself that I was listening to the ravings of a fake clairvoyant. But then it was not funny anymore. It was like she knew everything about me. My first tripping moment, the name of my favorite children's toy, how Brent and I went on our first date. I asked her about the future, cautiously, with a catch. I'm not a fool like that, to immediately believe everything. Cassandra had something like a seizure, and then she stated that tomorrow, Brent would go to the cinema with me and he would be wearing a red tie. I knew for sure that Brent's plans for tomorrow are completely different and he doesn't have a single red tie. And then Cassandra creepily rolled her eyes and claimed that Brent would die if I were not around him the next day. That was just not appropriate. I shot out of the marquee and, grabbing the perplexed Sarah by the elbow, dashed off as far as possible. Home. On the next day, Brent showed up without a call. He said that he had the first publication in a scientific journal that day, so on that occasion, he was let go off the lecture and was presented with a terrible tie, which he had to wear, and that he was calling me to the cinema to celebrate this. The tie was red. I couldn't think of anything else. Just try to understand me. I could not believe my eyes. The situation needed explanations, and I ran back to that fortune teller. How easily can someone confuse you? A crystal ball and a couple of ridiculous coincidences were enough to catch me. That time, the fortune teller was not even surprised to see me. Allegedly, the spirits had already sent her a vision, and that vision said that only her leadership would lead me to a happy life. Otherwise, a terrible fate awaited me and all my close ones. That is how my new life started. Every day like clockwork, I came to the fortune teller's marquee and got my routine for the day. The first day, I had to go for an important dinner with Brent, otherwise he would choke on a fishbone and die. The second day, a visit to the theater, or Brent would be shot dead by the groom of one of the actresses when Brent would come to give her flowers. To save myself and my close ones, I had to rush around the city with Brent's orders, smile at his friends, go to his stupid exhibitions. I couldn't even argue with him. I fell apart when Brent started talking about having a dinner with my parents. Before that, there was a week of Brent's colorful fantasies about how wonderful a startup he found and how profitably he wanted to invest the money that he had never had. I understood that he was about to pull money out of my father during that dinner. We had a quarrel and I told him to leave. It was my first free evening since the circus arrived at town, and I wanted to have a rest, but I couldn't relax. The fortune teller said that Brent and my father would be in trouble if I didn't agree with what Brent would say that day. It was nonsense, wasn't it? And if not? On that evening, I got 2 calls. One was from my father. Someone scratched his car while he was in the office. Another one was from Brent. Brent got into the hospital. Someone attacked him, biffed his eye, and took off his wallet. Well, thanks for staying alive. I agreed to arrange dinner with my parents. I did not try to argue with the predictions anymore. I only counted the days before the circus leaves and my torment ceases. I was sick of the fear at the sight of a tent of a damned fortune teller who brought so much anxiety and headache into my careless life. The fortune teller didn't say this directly, but I felt what everything was going towards. If I did not promise to marry Brent, it would end badly. On the last day before the circus is leaving, I went to the tent as if to be executed. I decided to come earlier to get things done quickly, hazily telling Brent that I had business in the city. I was so tired of saving him during these weeks that I almost hated him. I bent to step into the stinking sweet twilight that had already become familiar, pulled back the edge of the curtain with my hand, and froze. Because I heard Brent's voice. I still had no time to understand anything, but I already got my phone out and turned on audio recording, and not in vain. Oh, I heard a lot of fun things.
Cassandra, she had a young, clear voice when she did not wheeze predictions, told Brent that she had earned twice as much off the Fool than she usually does in the season. Brent replied that he would earn even more thanks to the help of Cassandra and her crystal ball. They spent a couple of minutes indulging in memories of the past, how they studied at school together, how they attended the prom together. Brent not only knew Cassandra, she was his ex. Then Brent began to list what other predictions were needed to be made. To convince me to marry him, to stop behaving like a savage, and so that I definitely won't go anywhere, she offered to prophesy him, for example, an accident, and he would take good care to get into it. I got good 10 minutes of incriminating evidence on my phone, which I immediately sent out to everyone. My friends, his friends, our parents. And then I triumphantly entered the tent. Oh, how these two were acting. Cassandra even pretended to have a seizure with visions. But it was too late. I broke up with Brent right there. I predict that Brent will not get money for startups, and he will make no connections in this town. As for me, I don't need any future tellers anymore. Thanks a lot. I will arrange my fate without the help of crystal balls. Enjoyed the story? Be sure to give it a like and stay on our channel. There are many more useful videos here. And be careful with predictions.